Hello there everyone, this is Brother Birch. In this video, we will be looking at some very common JavaScript errors that you can see pop up here in the console. Okay, so I have a program here which should do the following. Takes all these inputs and it makes like a little like mailing address label, okay, formatted properly. Now, these errors right here, you will only see if your developer tools are open. So notice if I close this right now, everything looks fine. I can put in my name and some street and a city and a state and a zip code and nothing happens. Okay, which can be pretty tough to work with if you have no idea what's going on. So if you hit F12 or right click and hit inspect or hit Control Shift L, any one of those should open up these developer tools. Look, I have multiple errors right here. So I'm going to refresh the page. Uh, and the reason why I did that is because I want to deal with the first error that came up before I worry about anything else. Okay, when I hit the button, probably another error popped up. And so we're going to work with this first error. Okay, it says uncaught syntax error, unexpected end of input. If I click here, it will take me to my sources tab and it will show me where that error was thrown. It says unexpected end of input. Now, this might be kind of hard to figure out, but the reason why it's saying unexpected end of input is because, I closed my script tag, but it wasn't expecting me to, which means it was expecting something else. So something inside of my script tag was opened without being closed. Let's take a look. All right. If I look at this, so my text editor will show me where the opening brackets are and closing brackets and things. And if I look at this opening curly brace, I don't see any closing curly brace. Okay, so let's go ahead and stick a closing curly brace right there. Ooh, look, now they're highlighting each other. Perfect. So I'm going to save it, come back in here and hit refresh. I hit F5 and look at my console and I don't have any errors. So that fixed that one. So I'm going to come in here and say 134 Main Street, whoops, Rexburg, Idaho, 83440. Make address. All right, show address is not defined. Anytime you see uncaught reference error, something is not defined, it means you tried to use a variable or a function that doesn't exist. All right, so let's look at this line of code. Okay, it says, as soon as I clicked on this button, show address, this guy isn't defined. Well, it's defined right here. So let's take a look. If I look at my code, remember JavaScript is a case-sensitive language. Okay, if I search for this string, I can see both of these are results in the search. However, if I make this search case sensitive, I now have one of one result, which is this guy right here, which means this was not defined. Okay, so if we come back here and look at this error, it says show address is not defined. It's true, it wasn't, because capital S show address was defined, not this one. Let's refresh the page and let's try again. Main, Rexburg, Idaho, 8440. Okay. Oh, we have another error. Cannot read property value of null. Uncaught type error, cannot read property value of null. Okay. So if I click on that error, it's talking about this value right here. Cannot read value of null. Okay. Which means this right here came up as null. For whatever reason, this whole thing right here came up as null, which is why it said cannot read property value, this guy, of null. Okay, so I would need to look at this, make sure the document is spelled right, get element by ID is spelled right, and that the casing is right, and then make sure that I have a name ID. Okay, so I'm pretty sure all this looks good, but if I want to check Google document.getElementById by ID and make sure that my casing is right there, and then I would want to check to make sure that I have a name ID. So I'm going to search for that, and you can see I have two instances of name with a capital N. This guy right here, and a label. Look right here, I have an ID of name, but it's a lowercase n. So that's my issue there. So I'm going to make that change, save it, refresh this page, and let's run through this again. All right, we have a new error. Uncaught type error, document.getElementById is not a function. Now, if I look at my console, you'll see this exact same thing popped up. If you click on this button, it'll take us right back to where we just were. Okay, So it says document.getElementById is not a function. All right, so I can see obviously that this is different than this one is. But if it were my first one and I was getting this error, I would either look in my book, look at a previous assignment where I know I used get element by ID, or Google it. Okay. But the issue here is we didn't have a lowercase d in ID. Okay. Simple stuff, but they're causing my program to break. All right, let's try this again. See if we have any other errors. And we do. All right. So uncaught type error cannot read property length of undefined. So this looks kind of like the value of null thing. So we declared message. We didn't assign it anything. And then we tried to say message dot length. Okay. Now if message were a string, this would work fine. But as it is now, message doesn't have anything in it. So we can't get the length attribute from it. Okay. This is the same thing anytime you have like an object. Let's say I was using the math object. Um, so here in our console, we can use math.py, for example, um, or anything. I could say math.random and see what that would spit out for us for a random number. But let's say I said math.superrandom. Okay, look at that. Math.superrandom is not a function. Okay, you can't call it because it doesn't exist. That same exact thing just happened here, but it just said math or length of undefined. Okay, which just means this doesn't exist for that, in a similar way that super random doesn't exist in math. Okay, if I try to say math.egg, okay, it would just say undefined, like, hey, that doesn't exist, you know. Um, so anyways, let's go ahead and fix that error. I'm just going to delete this line of code and save it and refresh it. And let's try this again. All right, 38 popped up. Okay, if we look at where message.length now, we did display, and that was name, break, street, break, city, comma, state, space, zip. All of this kind of merged together into a nice little format. And it's saying that that length is 38. So notice as soon as we turned our message into a string, we had that length value and that was valid. Okay. And then it popped up our address here, which as far as for the stuff that I gave it, it actually looks pretty good. Okay, so those are just a couple of really common errors that I see most weeks when students are submitting assignments. And just to be clear, these are JavaScript errors that we're going through. HTML errors will not show up in here. Okay, this is all working with JavaScript. Even though you see HTML right here, we're worried about the JavaScript right here in the sources tab, and it's these errors that will show up in the console as well. Okay, to isolate HTML errors, use the validator, the HTML validator. If I just go to Google and say HTML validator, the first thing that comes up will always be the w3.org one, and that's the one that you want to use. Okay. And with that, I think we went through a good list of errors here. So if you have any questions, just let me know, but hopefully this helps clear up a couple of the errors you might be seeing.